And so now we're going to turn to our forum, and I just wanted to do a quick intro of the format. So this is obviously the sobering basis for this event being organized and why we decided for a candidate forum to focus entirely on the housing question. So that's what we're doing today. And each candidate will have 2 minutes for their own self-introduction, 3 minutes to answer 3 questions, 3 minutes each for 3 questions, and we'll alternate the order of the speakers. We'll be doing a time check to help folks who are speaking, and then we'll have 1 to 2 minutes for people to wrap up.
Thank you so much for this opportunity. My name is Shebreh Kalantari-Johnson. I'm an immigrant from Iran, and I moved to the US when I was 8 years old. I've lived here in Santa Cruz for over 20 years, first as a student, then as a renter, and now as a homeowner. I'd like to share some of my core values: equity, well-being, diversity, and inclusion. I've implemented these over the last 20 years, doing the work in our community, and I'll bring them as your supervisor. Equity. As your supervisor, I'll work on equity through increased resources for public health needs, creating more responsive mental health and behavioral health in our county. How have I already done this? I've brought in over $4 million over the last 17 years. These dollars have helped address issues that contribute to inequities: immigration rights, homelessness, mental health, and juvenile justice reform. Well-being. 34% of our county's population are under the age of 25. As your supervisor, I'll partner across our systems: education, juvenile justice, child welfare, parks, to ensure that young people in this community have an environment where the healthy choice is the easy choice. How have I done this? I've helped bring forward policies that decrease youth access to substances. As a council member, I brought forward the Children and Youth Bill of Rights and supported the Children's Fund, bringing in steady sources of resources for vulnerable youth. Diversity and inclusion. As your supervisor, I'll ensure that we build housing for everyone in our community and push for public transit and safe, active transportation. I'll also work with our Women's Commission to develop an Office of Women's Policy to ensure that women's rights are at the forefront of our decision making. How have I done this? As a council member, I have 100% yes vote on housings, and I brought forward a resolution to guide our new housing element that calls for abundant housing and integration instead of segregation. I serve on our Metro board, and I'm actively supporting bus driver recruitment. I have brought forth resolutions confirming our city's support for reproductive rights and support for women's rights in Iran, my country of origin. I'm qualified to serve in this important role, and I know I would serve it well. Thank you for tonight's forum.
Okay. Thank you, Shebreh. And at 1 minute, 54 seconds, that was right on time. So thank you for doing that. Okay, Justin.
Great. Well, thank you all for having me. And I just want to start by saying the No Place Like Home project, when they had their meeting at the Civic Center, was actually how I had started getting involved in local politics. I'm an environmental scientist with a bachelor's in biology and a bachelor's in Spanish from Eastern Illinois University. And I'm the first and only Black male to have graduated with a PhD in ecology and evolutionary biology from UCSC. I'm a fluent Spanish speaker, and most recently in my professional career, I've helped create 2 nonprofits at UCSC, which target college students and focus on increasing diversity in the fields of environmental conservation and tech around the use and application of drones for good through paid experiential learning opportunities. In 2018, I was one of 2 Black men elected to the Santa Cruz City Council for the first time in history. I've served as a Santa Cruz City Council member, former vice mayor, and in 2020 was the first Black mayor during one of the most challenging years in the history of our community, as we dealt with the onset of COVID, social unrest after the murder of George Floyd, and the CZU fires. Throughout those times in my time on the council, I've been effective at bringing people together from different viewpoints to get things done. In addition to all this, I'm a renter, and just like many of the students at UCSC and many working professionals in our community, I struggle to afford to live in this town. This is the same for many college students, our teachers, UCSC city, county workers, nurses, construction workers, small business owners, and many more who are the foundation of our community. This has had significant impacts on climate change because when people have to live further away, they spend more time driving their cars, which means more pollution in our atmosphere. During my time on council, as it relates to housing, I've spent a lot of time fighting for tenants' rights. When I ran for office, I ran on a pro-rent control campaign and helped get rent control put on the ballot, which was done in collaboration with many UCSC students. I worked to increase the percentage of affordable housing in new units from 15 to 20%. I brought forward letters in support of the 2020 grad student wildcat strike which was unanimously supported by the city council. I've worked with students and community members to pass ordinances decriminalizing psychedelic plants and fungi in the city of Santa Cruz. I've worked on this UCSC Growth Task Force to help hold the university accountable for providing housing on campus. And currently I'm working with Senator Laird's office to investigate the recent purchase of the Hilltop Apartments by the UC and the subsequent eviction of many students on campus. I've been working diligently.
Okay. Justin, we're going to have to stop to make sure that we can get
presentation. And as county supervisor, all right.
Sorry to cut you off. And it's a little difficult because there's a little sometimes delay and technical glitch. But we'll move on. I think it was, thank you both for that. And we want to start, and you mentioned some of these, but the first question for both of you, and this time we'll start with Justin answering. In the context of changing state and local housing policy, what concrete policies will you pursue to meet the affordable housing needs of Santa Cruz? And how will your housing policies meet community equity goals, particularly in terms of race, socioeconomic status, and in terms of serving both homeowners and renters? And you'll have 3 minutes.
Great. Well, I think one of the things that's most important and what we need to acknowledge is representation in our local government. So Blacks and Latinos face the highest rates of poverty and the lowest rates of homeownership in Santa Cruz County. And it's really critical that when we talk about diversity, equity, inclusion, that those voices are at the table. But when we talk about policy, first and foremost, when I become county supervisor, I'm going to do what I did in the city of Santa Cruz, which is increase the percentage of affordable units that go into new developments from 15 to 20%. We were successful at doing that in the city of Santa Cruz. And I believe now with the county's inclusionary percentage at 15%, we need to go further and we need to increase that. In addition to that, there are a number of good opportunities that I think we need to explore. One of which is the real estate transfer tax. This is a progressive tax measure that we could set the rate on when it kicks in above, let's say, 2 million homes that are sold for more than $2 million. But this is a taxation measure that's worked actually over in San Jose that's provided substantial funding towards homelessness. And if we had actually had that in place when the Hilltop Apartments sold, we would have had significant resources that we could have dedicated to affordable housing, given that that apartment complex sold for $117 million. In addition to that, I'm interested in exploring a parcel tax, $100 parcel tax. There's roughly 105,000 homes in Santa Cruz County. And if each home paid $100 per year as a parcel tax, that would generate $10,500,000 a year that we could put towards affordable housing. There's been discussion and work on a public bank, the interest from which, if we get that going, could be used also to provide financial assistance to low-income people, which could then help maintain and increase diversity within our community. And then we also have to realize that we have the Measure J program, which was adopted in 1978. And this is a housing program for below market rate homes. And the idea here is that these homes would be able to be sold to low-income people, and the resale value would actually be controlled so these homes could stay affordable moving forward in perpetuity. So these are just a few of the measures that I think we need to not only invest in, but explore, because for too long now, we haven't seen enough investment into how working people are going to be able to afford to live in this community. Oftentimes, we haven't seen the production of housing for a very long time. But now, as we're seeing more housing produced, we have to make sure that we're maximizing the amount of affordable housing going into those units, because if we don't, we won't see it built. And that's something that I've been pushing for, and increasing the percentage of affordable housing in new units is something that my opponent has voted against consistently on the city council. It's one area where we differ, but I think that we need to begin really pushing on new development so that we're building the maximum amount of affordable housing in new developments for the workforce and the people in our community that we desperately need.
Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you, Justin. Shebreh, same question to you. Would you like me to repeat it, or?
I got the question. Thank you.
Okay, and please project as much as you can. Speak up, because our speakers, unfortunately, are not so loud. So the more you could speak up, the better for us.
Sure. How's this?
That's good. Thank you.
All right. I sound like I'm yelling to myself, but as long as you all can hear me. So I don't need to belabor the fact that we are in a housing crisis and that it's hurting everyone. And, we really need to ask ourselves how we got here. I think for far too long, we've made policy decisions that have prevented us from growing sustainably. And we can no longer do that. We have to meet our housing goals. The state has come down with some policies because of our past decisions. And we have new RENA goals. We have new housing goals. And these goals didn't come out of nowhere. They're based on data that is in response to the need in our community. So there aren't enough small apartments available, even with a rent subsidy or adequate income to pay for moderate rent. So we need an all of the above approach. We need tenant protections, we need demolition protections, more affordable housing, more market housing, social housing, co-ops, more housing on campus. And it's going to be all hands on deck to create abundant housing for students, families, and elderly. I do want to clarify that students are actually not eligible for very low income housing per federal law. So it's important to remember that. And it's important that we need all kinds of housing. So we have an opportunity at the county to do this with a revision of our housing goal and our housing element. I brought forward a resolution in the city of Santa Cruz that gave some guidance as to how we should approach this. And I would do this at the county level as well. Some of these specifics included incentivizing higher density residential development or smaller units within the same building volume, something that City of Santa Cruz already passed. Considering streamlining of 100% affordable residential development and policy changes that would update square footage or development standards that can incentivize and promote ADU production. My opponent voted against this resolution and wanted to strike out the streamlining of 100% affordable housing. He also brought forward a resolution opposing SB 886, which streamlines campus housing because, quote, there wasn't an urgent need. I want to speak to the segregation and limiting housing choices. As a once undocumented immigrant woman of color, these issues of equity are very important to me. We truly care about diversity and equity inclusion, which I think we do. We really have to look at promoting fair housing. Again, we can do this through our housing element so that we build housing for everyone, for lower incomes, and there are specific policies that we can put forward. Rezoning of high resource areas, supporting tenant protections for development projects that include existing renters, and expanding the existing county home ownership program to ensure that historically excluded groups are included. So as your supervisor, I would be a supporter of abundant housing, as I have done on the city council.
Okay, thank you so much. So second question, and I'll ask this to Shebreh first, focuses on community and university relations. So there's been a history of town-gown friction, particularly around housing issues, both for students, but also for faculty and staff. What do you believe is the best way forward in regards to working with UCSC around affordable housing issues moving forward? And again, you have 3 minutes.
Thank you. So there seems to be an us versus them narrative that's been prevalent in our community for decades now around housing. It's between neighbors and developers, between locals and students, between students and the university, and all of the above, right? So I think it's important that we bring these various groups together when it comes to housing. One thing I would do as part of the revision of the housing element is to build a coalition of students, community housing advocates, neighbors, developers, and other experts in the field. This is something I have experience in doing, is bringing people from different perspectives together to come forward with a solution. I'll give you one example. When COVID hit, I was invited by the county emergency response team to help stand up shelter-in-place sites for youth and young adults experiencing homelessness, because that was a project I was working on. The county and the city came forward, and there was some opposition by neighbors on where we should place the trailers to provide transitional housing during COVID. We built, along with Supervisor Leopold at the time, who took leadership, we built a coalition. We brought together community advisors, neighborhood advisors, and together we created policies that would create a safe situation for both those youth who are unhoused and the neighboring communities. So that's just one example of how I brought different groups together so we can work together on a contentious issue. I think that UCSC students are critical in these efforts.
Thank you.
I'm sorry? Oh, okay, go. Okay. Sorry. I think that UCSC students are critical in these efforts. On the city council, I brought forward the Children and Youth Bill of Rights, which as one of its action has a youth and a council member working together on a regular basis on policy issues, and youth are compensated for this. In addition, I've appointed our youngest and only UCSC student to the Transportation Commission, and I think our youngest and only UCSC student among all of our commissions. And I recently appointed a UCSC graduate who now works at UCSC to the Transportation Commission, so that these voices are at our table. I encourage all of you students who are out there watching and listening to get involved in the coalitions on campus. I know the Student Housing Coalition has done a lot on this. I'm in constant communication with the leaders of that coalition, because your voice matters and we need your voice at the table so that we can advocate for fair housing across our county. This is the lens and approach that I bring and that I would continue to bring as your supervisor. Thank you.
Thank you. Justin, 3 minutes, same question.
Sure. Well, again, I can speak to this question from experience. I was a grad student, as I mentioned, at UCSC from 2007 to 2013. And since 2015, I've actually been staff at UC Santa Cruz. And so, again, in terms of representation, I am one of these people who's being affected by the housing crisis, and also see it through, the amount that staff are able to earn on campus, and what that, provides us in terms of housing. And the fact of the matter is, it's not a whole lot. As I mentioned before, I'm a renter. I can't afford to save much. Well, now I can, because I'm working 2 jobs and I have affordable housing. But for most staff, let alone students, affording to live in this community is crippling, to say the least. As it relates to, how we can get through this town to gown friction, when I was mayor back in 2020, I began to work with the new chancellor, Cindy LaRive, and having many conversations around this topic in particular. And one of the things that, came up was that, where can we build the housing? Because oftentimes we see a lot of pushback in certain areas whenever the university is trying to develop. And I think that it's really important that we are bringing people together from the town, students, UC, and that we're working collaboratively. This hasn't been the case previously. And for example, right now we're in the middle of a lawsuit over our long-range development plan, because it seemed that the UC regions felt that they could just kind of push this plan through and get this plan approved, even though there were obvious deficiencies. And this is something around process that I kind of bring to the table, which is, let's work through what the issues are and what the problems are, so we can get to a place where we're not going to find ourselves stuck in lawsuits for years and years, spending millions of tax dollars, rather than actually moving forward with the solutions that our community needs. That's where we found ourselves with multiple projects at UCSC. And I believe that we need to actually come together as a community to figure out, what can we do that's going to work with the university and with the community, what's going to be most affordable for students, because oftentimes the housing that the university creates is market rate or above market rate. And we really need to be mindful of that. As I mentioned before, the Hilltop Apartments, which had previously been bought by Goldman Sachs back around 2020, had sold for $55 million. UC Regents just bought those apartments for $117 million. And I just imagine how much, if they had taken that $117 million and really put it towards supporting affordable housing on campus and for students to live affordably on campus, how far that could have gone. Because after buying that building, they actually ended up pushing students out, pushing residents out of the community, and that's going to do nothing but continue to raise more friction. So we need to find ways to collaborate, and we need to find ways to make sure that what we're producing is affordable.
Okay, great. Thank you both. So the final question, and I want to apologize because the other parts of the forum are city focused. And so the question is mainly about city measures. So you saw the questions, and I know you're running at the county level, but Santa Cruz is an important part of the county. And the issues brought up in these measures are really important. So I'm going to ask, and again, this for Justin first and then Shebreh second. And the third question is, what are your positions on the two measures on the ballot that address affordable housing issues? Measure N, which is the empty homes tax, and Measure O, which is the downtown library, affordable housing, parking garage, and farmers market measure. Can you tell us in a couple of sentences, one, if you support, don't support, or undecided on these measures, and two, why do you take the positions that you're taking? Justin.
Great. Thank you for that question. I am in support of the empty home tax Measure N. It's something that I know people have wanted to see the city council move forward on in the past, and the city council, refused to take action on that. And so, a citizens initiative was launched to put that on the ballot. And I believe that, we need to do something about affordable housing. There's been consistent just pushback of, no, we can't do rent control, or no, we can't do, a tax on empty homes. But the idea is that, the city has identified that this could generate potentially between $2 to $4 million per year. But at the very least, it will encourage people who have empty homes to use their empty homes in our community, which means that they'd be here supporting local businesses, spending money that would go into our sales tax. And so I believe it's something that we need to explore. And there's been a lot of lies going around, oh, it's going to create this registry and it's going to be very invasive, which is not the case. So I support Measure N. When it comes to Measure O, I have decided to stay neutral on this one. And the reason why is because in 2018, when I ran for office, everybody was saying the city was planning on moving forward with a 6-story, 600-space parking garage on top of a newly built library on the farmers market lot. That is something that I opposed then and I oppose now. We, through my efforts, the city council formed a subcommittee. We spent about 9 months doing outreach to the community, hearing from them about what they would like to see. And through the input that we got from the community, we landed on what would be the most square footage for cost was a new library. And so then we continued that conversation and reduced the amount of parking, added affordable housing, and we presented that to the community. There are now people who are upset with that. And there are people who've actually brought some new information to the table, which suggests that it's not clear how the city is going to pay for the parking. Does the city have enough funds to move forward? So those people went and gathered signatures, and they now have the opportunity for the community to vote on it. And so now it's really up to the community. I feel like I did my part to stop a 6-story, 600-space parking garage from going on top of a library. And now it's up to the community to decide. And I think that both have valid points. We have the mixed-use project that has 124 units of affordable housing. And at the same time, if you met yes on O passes, it guarantees that all city lots will be dedicated to affordable housing. And it would stop the sale of city property to go towards the production of a market rate luxury hotel. And so I think there's a lot to weigh on this. And I've been asking the city for more information about the parking. And I'm hoping that I can find out more on how we can financially make the mixed project work. And I hope the community learns this too, so that people can make an informed decision on that measure.
Great, thank you, Justin. Shebreh, same questions, 3 minutes.
Thank you. I'll start with Measure N. I understand and I don't disagree with the intent of the city's proposed empty home tax. I'm not supporting it in its current form because I don't believe it adequately addresses our problem of needing housing and needing affordable housing. As I mentioned earlier, we need to build more housing. I haven't seen any data that shows that people actually give up their spaces for rentals. So I'm not sure that it actually addresses the rental vacancy issue. It's not likely to generate adequate revenue. It has high administrative burden and it draws resources and energy away from what I think should be a larger countywide effort in putting forward a housing bond. We had a housing bond on the ballot in 2018, which narrowly failed, but would have passed in the city of Santa Cruz. I supported it back then, and this is something that I am planning on engaging in the next round to bring forward a housing bond that is for our whole community. So that's where I think our resources and supports should go. In terms of Measure O, I am not in support of Measure O. It would stop our downtown affordable housing project, a project that brings in 124 units of affordable housing. I'll say it again, 124 units. That's a lot of units. It would bring forward a 21st century library with more square footage. It would bring a teen space. So selfishly, I'm interested in that because I have 2 teenagers. It would bring outdoor space. It would bring a garden to the residents of the affordable housing. It would bring a much needed childcare center. The information about funding has been brought forward by city staff. So they've given adequate information for me to make the decision that there is a plan in place. There was this independent city auditor who looked at Measure O, and the lots that are proposed by Measure O, there's only 6 that are eligible for affordable housing, and those same 6 are in our current general plan. So it doesn't do anything to add affordable housing. It takes away 124 units of affordable housing. Frankly, I don't see if anyone who says they're for affordable housing couldn't support my measure and couldn't take a public position. So if you're for affordable housing, then stand up and speak up and support the no on O.
Okay, thank you, Shebreh. So each candidate gets 1 to 2 minutes as a wrap up and just final. And Shebreh, we'll start with you.
Okay. Housing is a human right. We all know this. One of the ways my opponent and I differ is how we have shown up or not shown up for housing. Housing for everyone, including students, including families, including seniors. I've proven my commitment to housing with 100% yes vote on city council because we need housing at all levels. And this isn't because I'm the yes girl, but it's because I do the work ahead of time. I meet with and work with neighbors. I meet with developers. I meet with staff, and I try to shape a project to get it to a place where we can have a yes vote. This is my approach. This is how I've approached all my work. It's apparent in the results I produced in my over 20 years in this community. Results such as 61% reduction in youth homelessness in 3 years, 67% reduction in Latinx youth recidivating into the juvenile justice system, increased investment in children and youth in our city, increased mental health and substance abuse support for those in the criminal justice system, increased local jobs created, and action for women's rights here in our community and across the globe in our home country, my home country of Iran. The results is why I have a wide array of endorsements. Former Senator and current Board of Supervisor in Santa Clara County, Joe Simidian, current District 3 Supervisor Ryan Coonerty, former Mayor and Housing Advocate Don Lane, Superintendent of County Office of Education Faris Sabah, Democratic Women's Club, Bus Drivers Union, and many other public officials, community members, and organizations across our state. I have the experience, I have the commitment, and I ask all of you to elect me as your next supervisor and the first female to serve on our board in over a decade. Thank you. And I apologize, I will have to log off early as I have a fire prevention town hall that I'm co-hosting. Thank you for tonight.
Shebreh, thank you very much. Justin, you have 2 minutes.
Great. Well, this is my last year on the Santa Cruz City Council. And so as I end my term, I've fulfilled my commitment on the Santa Cruz City Council. And I've served in the capacity of council member, vice mayor, and mayor during one of the most difficult and challenging years of the history of our community. Santa Cruz County was founded in 1850. 172 years after its founding, Santa Cruz County has still never had a Black person on the Board of Supervisors. It's time we change that, especially since we say we care about diversity, we care about equity, we care about inclusion. Well, I think that it's time we have a renter, we have a Black person, and we have an environmental scientist on our Board of Supervisors. I would be the voice of people who've been historically excluded from local government, and I would bring experience in local government and science, which is something that would help us address the many crises in our community. I have the endorsements from the California State Democratic Party, Santa Cruz County Democratic Party, Planned Parenthood Advocates Marmonte, UCSC Democrats, Sierra Club, Santa Cruz for Bernie, and many, many more. I also have the endorsement of former Congressman Sam Farr, who's been an environmental champion in our community. And I know that we need to have the balance between sustainable development and environmental protection at the forefront of our decision-making process. And I do want to make sure that students are aware of something, because when we talk about the values that we bring, in the spring, this is the first time we're moving to district elections. And this spring, we had an opportunity to adopt maps that would increase diversity in our local office, in our local government. I voted to support the map that would have increased the representation of students, Latinos, Asians, working people, and lower income people. My opponent not only voted against that map, but she voted for a map that would segregate many of these communities and they were supportive of gerrymandered maps that reduced the representation and potential representation of people of color and low-income people in our local government. We need to have people who are going to stand up and fight for what's right in our community. And as county supervisor, I'm going to ensure that we're fighting to ensure that diversity is reflected in our local government and included in the decision-making process. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Justin. So please, let's just thank both Justin and Shebreh for coming, for showing up, coming to campus. We very much appreciate your time.